Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute. It's a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
And joining us once again today is Sean German, who has a lot of experience on these Movies by Minutes podcasts, including a couple of his own.
A podcast, a filthy, slimy podcast.
I didn't realize that's what it was called. Did you just rebrand?
No, but I think I might now. Yeah. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, that would be a unique name.
Now, Sean, before we dive into this minute, I know we've talked before this week. You have the Spinal Tap Minute, and the most recent one that you're doing right now is the Groundhog Minute. You also got 5 Minutes of Mime. But you've been a guest on several other Movies by Minutes podcasts. You got any you want to give a shout out to? Any that are your particular, faves or ones that you had a fun time being on?
Well, sure. I do want to give a particular shout out to my friends over at Indiana Jones Minute. They're a couple of great guys. One, just a great podcast to listen to, and they're deep in that. They're currently on Last Crusade, but they've worked their way through Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom 1 minute at a time. And they were also very supportive when I was just starting out. Tom Taylor, Pete Mummer, Jerry Porter, all very helpful, ready to answer questions on the technical side of recording and getting episodes out. They've got, t-shirts and stickers and how do you do that kind of stuff? How do you do merch and how does this all work? So they were really great to listen to. And then if you check that out, I was a guest during Temple of Doom for a few episodes. So you can listen to that as well. And then I also want to give a mention to Die Hard Minute, which is wrapping up or is wrapped up recently by the time you folks are listening to this. But it was a collaborative effort produced by Jim O'Kane. But it was a setup where, similar to this, where folks watched the movie Die Hard 1 minute at a time, but each week had a different set of hosts. So a different group of Movie by Minutes hosts would sit in and sort of guest host for 5 minutes of that movie. And I got to do guest spots with a couple different hosting teams. And then we also got to do a week ourselves. Dave Pallas and myself got to take over the Die Hard Minute for 5 minutes. So that's probably a good place if this is your first introduction through Wilder Minute, your first introduction to this Movie by Minutes thing, this format that's turning into a movement. Probably a next good place to go would be Die Hard Minute. It's one of the all-time great Christmas movies that you'll get to examine and listen to 1 minute at a time.
And yes, but, it is a Christmas movie.
Yes,
it is a Christmas movie, yes. But also then each week you'll get exposed to a different set of hosts, and then those hosts have different guests. So you'll get exposure to a lot of the different people that are working in this Movie by Minutes community. So I would encourage folks to check that out as well. And not just the minutes that I'm on, but the whole movie for Die Hard Minute.
That's really cool. I'm a big fan of the Indiana Jones Minute. Those guys are fantastic. I was a guest on The Thing Minute because I'm a huge John Carpenter fan and think The Thing still stands up as one of the best all-time horror movies out there. And I will check out Die Hard Minute because Die Hard may be one of my all-time favorite holiday films.
Mm-hmm. I love Die Hard. That is one of my, probably in my top 10 favorite movies.
It's one of those movies when the wife and I say, well, what do you want to watch tonight? There's nothing on TV. You're never wrong to go back and pull out Die Hard.
At any time of the year, but particularly at Christmas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that you, your question prompted me to think of Indiana Jones Minute. We had a Temple of Doom reference yesterday. And I've got something in my notes for later on that there's a parallel between something we see in Young Frankenstein in this movie and something that gets done later in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I'm not gonna say exactly what it is yet, but just a little foreshadowing. There may be some additional Indiana Jones content coming down the line.
Well, you know what? And I think we're both fans here of that franchise, the trilogy, because as far as we know, there's only 3 movies in that trilogy.
Only 3.
So
the trilogy, yes.
So we are looking forward. Well, the beauty of this podcast being the hosts, we can choose to do whatever we want, and we have permission to go ahead and dive down any rabbit trail that makes us happy. That work for you all?
It's good to be the
Works
king.
for me.
It's good to be the king.
Well, I am the king of the rabbit trail, so...
Well, let's go down to minute 29. Speaking of going down, our main characters, Dr. Frankenstein and Inga, are slowly making their way down a spiral staircase at the top of minute 29, having just had the flash of lightning and thunder as a rat is crossing their paths. And we will end with a slow camera track across some various skulls in various stages of decay. So let's get to it. The very first time that the good doctor has to play protector for Inga, we mentioned this yesterday, is in the hay cart when lightning flashes, but he doesn't seem to be afraid of lightning and thunder because he sort of laughs it off and says it's nothing but a static discharge in the atmosphere. It's purely scientific explanation for it. I noticed something different here. When it comes to just a simple... Now, he's a scientist. How many scientists work on lab rats? Like almost all of them, right?
Almost all of them, no matter what their discipline is.
But for some reason, even though he tries to, reassure her, he doesn't seem too comfortable around said rat.
No, and he also departs from science on this one because he calls it a filthy, which he gets, that's accurate, slimy rat. I haven't been around rats every day in my life, but how many rats are slimy?
No, they're not. They're not slimy unless they've just crawled out of something, but he obviously is not.
Yeah, his observation is it is a filthy, slimy rat.
Well, and he isn't just a scientist. He is a doctor, a medical doctor, not a PhD. So working with bodies and cadavers and animals, certainly at this time, there would have been a lot of experimenting and working on animals. And even just coming up through school, you start with, at some point, you're dissecting amphibians and frogs, and you move up to small mammals and stuff. Surely he would have cut up many a small animal while working on his medical techniques. So, to be this squeamish by this friendly little mouse.
And by the way, according to the script, because I've got it up in front of me, they had 0 lines for this. He was not supposed to say anything. So this was one of those moments where they chose to add something at the last minute, either on the set, or there may be yet another rewrite that I don't have. I've got the 3rd revision that was supposedly the final revision blessed by 20th Century Fox when they went to go into production. And there's no mention at all of what he says about the rat.
So this would be one of their few possible ad-libs.
Could be. And are we getting Gene Wilder coming through Dr. Frankenstein? Or is this Gene Wilder recognizing how funny it would be to have a doctor who's squeamish about a rat?
I'm going to go with the genius of Gene Wilder ad-libbing this one.
When in doubt, it's always a genius move.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially since we've got his namesake in our title of our podcast.
Yes.
Probably we don't want the estate of Gene Wilder to shut us down for berating him.
Man, that would be a terrible thing. No, and I'm never going to berate Gene Wilder.
No.
I have to think that, and plus with him being one of the primary writers of this, found a good moment for some odd humor, I guess, an odd observation from the doctor.
Here's something, and this is talk about a little bit of a side trail. People pass away all the time. Obviously, it's the circle of life. We know that. People die, and there have been plenty in our lives based on what we do in radio. Walt, you and I, we talk about movies and comic books and things like that when we are guests with BK on the Air, which is the show that we sometimes are on, or I'm on pretty consistently. You're guest on. When it comes to celebrities, there are very few that actually affect me. When Gene Wilder passed away, it affected me.
Oh, man.
I did not expect it. I mean, it's got to happen. I just didn't want it to happen.
No, I mean, it caught me very much by surprise. And then to find out, kind of his last few months were very difficult, it definitely had an effect on me.
Sean, what do you think when it comes to celebrity deaths and specifically Gene Wilder?
Yeah, I'm the type of person that it usually doesn't affect me, and I kind of question, or maybe question isn't the right word, but I wonder when people are deeply affected, I wonder, you didn't know this person. Yes, you are a fan and you appreciate their art or their work, but if it's not a family member, if it's not someone that you've met personally, I wonder how much can you really be affected by just knowing about someone, not knowing them personally. But or that's the way I used to think. But there were 2 recent passings that I'll admit I got emotional over that affected me more than I expected, that I was a little surprised to how much I felt the loss. Carrie Fisher was one, the great Carrie Fisher who passed recently, and Gene Wilder was another, in terms of not family members, not friends, no one I've ever met or, to my knowledge, ever been in the same room with in person. I just know them through their art, but the place that art has in my life and what they were able to do and the entertainment that they provided. Yeah, an example of, something that kind of struck me. Like you said, I knew he's human. We're all mortal, and we're kind of heading in that general direction. But I had known that his health had not been the best for some time. But even when you know it's coming, like a lot of the laughs and some of the jump scares in the movie, even when you know it's coming, it can still get you. And certainly was the case for me and Gene. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, and the reason why it did affect me is because as a young child, I remember some of my earliest experiences with film, with movies, either on TV or in the theater. And so when you're only 7 or 8 years old, you don't have a whole lot of a buffer. So these things make a huge impact on you. And for me, and the reason we picked the 3 characters on our website and the Facebook page, to me, the 3 most emblematic roles he's played or films that he's been in, most people go back to Willy Wonka, Blazing Saddles, and Young Frankenstein. It was Blazing Saddles was the very first film I ever saw with Gene Wilder, followed immediately by Willy Wonka. And it made such an impression on me that I've just been a Gene Wilder fan before I even knew what it meant to say I'm a Gene Wilder fan.
Yeah, and for me, it was Young Frankenstein first, Blazing Saddles second, and Silver Streak was my third. I saw that when I was really young, and very different roles for him in each of the 3. But when he passed, it was a very, very, I won't say difficult, but it was kind of a surprising passing. Tom Petty was the other one for me, I think.
Tom Petty had hit me hard as a musician.
Yeah, he had such a long history with me, being a lifelong Tom Petty fan as far back as I can remember.
And it could be, much like with films, for me, my wife is a Tom Petty fan, I'm a Tom Petty fan, so we can share that together. So we've always had sort of like that music in the background of our lives, and now to realize you're not going to get any more Tom Petty hits or no more tours, or I think maybe that's just we're getting older. And I don't like thinking that way. I don't like thinking about it.
Yeah, by the time this drops, I will have turned 50. So
I'm sorry.
It's
do we need a sad belt like the Indiana Jones guys?
No, I'm celebrating. This is like, woohoo! I made it.
We just had this conversation the other night at dinner. I said, you know what? Because somebody wants. I won't name names, but they're throwing their own 50th birthday because they want to make sure it's done right. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't care for a 50th. You know what? It's another day. Let's go out and do something fine. But I don't want to milestone it as if somehow, wow, this is some massive achievement. Now, maybe when I hit 90, fine. But
if I hit 90, there will be a party.
And there will be much beverage flowing.
Yes, there will.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get back to minute number 29 then. We are starting off right at the very beginning here on the staircase. And we get the sense that Dr. Frankenstein has an issue with the rat. And they actually quicken for a brief moment. We don't see where the rat is. And Sean, you brought this up. I mean, there's no railing or anything, but that rat, wherever he went, maybe he dove off the deep end, but they rapidly drop 4 or 5, or run down 4 or 5 steps before going back to their slow, typical exploration walking speed.
Although they do seem to be more cautious. They start walking down the stairs and they're upright. They are hugging the tower or the curved surface inside to kind of stay away from the dangerous edge. But I think towards kind of the end of last minute, they're starting to walk down the stairs. They stop. They're startled by, or Inga's startled by the rat. But then after this, when they continue on, they're very hunched over, it looks like. They're more tentative with their movement. So maybe this rat has, we know it affected Inga, but it seems to have affected Frederick. Perhaps more than he'd like to admit.
Yeah, they seem to be walking with a little bit more of a heightened sense of awareness.
Yeah, because at first I almost wondered, because we see Frederick's kind of bent over. He's crouching a little bit as he's walking, but his head is still at the level of hers. And for a moment, I'm like, I wondered, is he 2 or 3 steps above her? That they're the same height, even though he's bent over? But then I noticed, no, she's crouched over as well. They're both, I don't know if that's maybe a defense mechanism. You make your cross section, you have less exposure, you're a smaller target if something comes at you kind of bent over like that. But yeah, they're both really crouched over as they inch their way down the stairs through what about the first 8 seconds or so of this minute.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that stands out to me in this minute, and particularly on the staircase, and I've said this before, if this had been shot in color, it would have had a completely different feel to me. And I don't think that the rat would have had the kind of startling impact that it did. And I also don't think that the whole set here, the stairs and, the cobblestone stairs or whatever the stone stairs, this has so much more power in black and white than it would have had in color. And it kind of continues to go back to the brilliance of that decision to shoot this completely in black and white.
Right, and not just black and white, but also light it specifically to match the 30s style of the Frankenstein movies, even to a point of maybe embellishing some of the shadows and some of the light to really create the sense that we're making a period film. Yeah. And think about it, this is a period movie.
Absolutely.
Even though we know he's in 1974, we know it technically takes place modern times. We've said this over and over, but it bears repeating. As we've traveled to Transylvania, we've literally traveled back in time as far as how we interpret what's happening on the screen.
Yeah, we are in the 1930s.
Or at least the 1930s version of Dracula.
It definitely has that feel.
Sean, as we move closer to the door, we've got a wonderful moment here. I said in previous minutes, they always leave you guessing. Is what you're going to get next a startle or more toward the scare, monster picture, horror side, or is it going to go more toward the parody, the satire, the pratfall side of comedy? So we've got a great moment where he's reaching out tentatively for the door handle. It bears asking again if you can remember what it was like, but were you expecting what happens?
Well, I want to back up a little bit. It's the last 4 or 5 seconds leading up to Frederick reaching out for that handle. And what we're going to get is funny, but they're setting us up for the scary. The framing of this shot, the camera's low. We're kind of looking through a cobweb that's close up in the foreground. The door is in the background, and we see them crossing right to left. Just the composition of this shot is very ominous. And like you said, the lighting and having it in black and white kind of just heightens the mood, that it's building up the tension. And again, with the big spider web or the cobweb in the foreground, it's building us up. I feel like I'm being led to expect a scare. I'm kind of tightening up. Is it going to be another flash of lightning? Is it going to be another jump scare? Is someone going to jump through the door? And then the handle just disintegrates ridiculously in his hand. And not just the way it breaks, it's old. I don't know if it's metal that's rusted through or if it's supposed to be wood that's rotten, but it's so soft the way it crumbles. But then when he drops it, it makes the very loud clang against the stone floor. Yeah, and I feel like it's leading me. I've been led on. I'm like, tension, tension, tension. No, it's a joke.
It is the joke. And you're right. The 5 or 6 seconds of staging the camera low through the cobweb, watching them slowly and tentatively approach the door. And then I love it. It goes to a first person perspective. We're looking through Gene Wilder's eyes down at his own hand. And it's that typical slow motion approach of the hand to the door, very slowly wrapping the fingers around. And then all of a sudden it crumbles. And he looks down. He's like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, this is like the 7th or 8th now, you've got to be kidding me expression we're getting from Gene Wilder.
Yeah. And as the audience, I mean, we've just had a jump scare. We've had walk down through the darkness up to the door. And then you get that joke. It's, just masterful the way they've said this.
There's something for everyone. We talked a little bit earlier in the week. There's the setup for Inga's line, put the candle back. And it's a long time. They set it up. They set the scene. They take, what they have to do to make that line that isn't funny in and of itself, but to have it come out in a setting that makes it funny. It's very, I don't know if high comedy is the right term, but it's more thoughtful, whereas this is leaning more towards the slapstick, that it's not just the broad range of what you get in this movie. It isn't just from the monster to the horror to the period to the comedy. It's also, even within the comedy, there's the thoughtful stuff. There's the complicated stuff that you kind of got to think about that takes a while to set up. And then there are the little moments of slapstick and the lower humor and the quicker things that just the way that crumbles in his hand.
I also like when he has the expression on his face of, can you believe this? Or you got to be kidding me. It's a very low angled shot straight up at him, almost as if the camera was at the base of their feet looking straight up. It's a very cool composition shot to give us this reveal of the expression on his face. So it's almost within the shot, combining your typical, that horror sense of camera placement, and yet the rolling of his eyes of like, can you believe this?
Yeah. It's almost like, yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
And then with the candle, he has there's a little bit of like that flashlight under the chin effect of the way he's lit, which we can see his face, we can see an expression, and we get the effect and still keeping Inga in frame because we're coming up from that low angle.
Well, as we push past the door, now we're exactly halfway through this minute. I love, again, I'm talking composition, but being involved in film myself, having done a lot of video direction, I notice a lot of this. The foreground filled with all these dusty, covered, web covered and dust covered bottles and jars and containers and glasses, and it looks like we're at the very edge of a lab of some kind, and then have them come in the background in the frame. In one shot, I know exactly where I am. I'm in some kind of either storage room or laboratory, but we're getting ever closer to, I'm predicting where we're heading. We're heading to Frankenstein's actual lab, and I love this shot as they walk into the room.
Yeah, it's almost as if the people that did this were professionals that knew what they were doing.
Almost like that.
Almost.
Yes. Yeah.
We get him in the shot here. They get a chance to sort of look around, and just as Gene Wilder begins to look off to his right, we again get almost a point of view what he's looking at. And here's where I'm going to get a little more macabre from the Did You Know file. But we look at a skull sitting on a pedestal, and in front of the skull it says 3 years dead. That is an actual human skull in this film. They used actual skulls coming along this line here from various cadavers to show various states of decay.
When I read that and found that out, there were so many questions that came up on this. And I think one of the questions is, did the skull's owner get credit as an actor in this? But also, how in the world were they able to do that?
I don't know. This is something where if I ever got Mel Brooks, I'm going to say, you know what? I've read this, and it's been corroborated in multiple places. So how does one go about shopping for skulls? Is there a store in Hollywood? Is it freaky out there to where you can pick out, say, can I get 2 of the 6 month, 1 of the 1 year, and 2 of the 2 and 1 of the 3 year? Is that where they keep them?
Or did somebody have these lying around? And
I've given up the whole Silence of the Lambs thing. I've got some leftovers. I've got some bits.
And this guy looks pretty ragged. He's been through the grinder here. His teeth are missing, and he's rough looking. Yeah, he's a meth head. Exactly. That is the lesson from this.
Well, and so has the actor in this, the actor who is portraying the 3 years dead skull, is it method? Is this someone who's been dead for 3 years, or is that makeup?
Is it makeup? Right. Yeah. He's actually been dead for 10, but we had to de-age him.
Well, yeah. and the fact that he's sitting in Dr. Frankenstein's lab, he's actually been dead, 43 years at this point?
Well, technically, yeah. I wonder, how do you keep it from aging past that point? Because if you wanted a reference point to figure out how long does it take for skin and muscle and tissue to eventually rot or fall off and leave you with just the skull, how do you stop it from continuing to age?
Yeah, that's a great question because
it's not in formaldehyde. It's not protected in any way.
Sitting out on the table.
It's not in a jar. Yeah, because I wonder, because there was a show where someone referenced they had, I think it was like a 30-year-old bottle of scotch. And that's, scotch doesn't work that way. If you buy a 5-year-old bottle of scotch and you save it for 25 years, that doesn't give you 30-year scotch. No. That gives you a 25-year-old 5-year bottle.
Right. That's exactly what it gives you.
So in this case, is this, how do you get a 40-year-old 3 years dead skull versus ending up with a 43 years dead skull?
Right. It strains credulity for me right now, but it is funny to watch.
In a castle that, thinking of the circumstances. So there is some science. We've seen the signs as we've entered this room that it's some sort of lab, and we know Frederick's grandfather was a scientist or experimenter of sorts. But we also know they don't have electricity. There's no indoor lights, but they do have indoor lightning. So yeah, what
Right.
what technology was available to them to preserve these heads? I will say when I first found out, which was when you guys told me right before we did this, that
Just moments
now.
ago.
just moments ago, that these were actual skulls, to just bring a little bit of visual to the audio medium of podcast. The face I made, it was just about the face that Frederick makes at second 45, right after he sees this skull. And I think that's the appropriate reaction. It's just that yeah.
He's got the combination of, did someone fart? And I can't believe I'm standing next to the cadaver head of a dead body.
Yeah.
He's like, ooh.
Well, when I read
Once
it,
again, though, he would have been exposed to stuff like
yeah,
this.
right. He's worked around dead bodies and he's worked around a lab. Well, and when I read it, I actually had to read it twice because I was like,
I went to 4 or 5 different places because I was like, there's no way.
yeah, this
this-
cannot be true. And I would have to think that if this was filmed today, there's no way they would be allowed
No.
to use a real human skull.
Real skulls, yeah. So which one of these are actual skulls? The 3 years dead, the 2 years.
The 3 years and the 2 years are
Okay.
the actual dead people.
I got to
but
go
not
back
the
and
6
look, but I
months.
thought the 6 month was as well.
The 6 month maybe as well.
Yeah.
It's one thing like just bone and knowing it used to be a person. That's pretty gruesome. At 6 months, there's still flesh. We can see lips.
Well,
That's gruesome.
And this would actually be 40 years in 6 months at this point.
40 years
so,
and 6 months.
because, I mean,
Well,
obviously.
actually, I think Frau Bluka just she always gets the latest models and puts them out. So these are probably correct based on their signs.
yeah, this
Is there a service that comes through that once a month they deliver fresh heads and they take away the old heads?
Yeah, it's timed with the same people that bring you your bottled water for your water dispenser. They'll come in, they'll collect all of the old heads and bring you some fresh samples. So that way your 3-year sample always looks 3-year.
Yeah, it's Bob's
yeah.
dead heads, and they just have a truck
Bob's
full
dead
of heads.
Not to be mixed up with fans of the Grateful.
no, absolutely. Yeah, leave us out of it.
Well, though I'm thinking you were saying that this happens. This was contemporary. The timing of the movie was contemporary for when it came out in the early 70s. But when they travel to Transylvania, they step back in time. So they're stepping back to a time when, for example, you had a milkman that came around and delivered milk. Not something most people have in modern day America these days. But there was a time someone came around and would deliver milk and other dairy to you on a daily basis. So hey, he's traveling around anyway. Maybe he's just got some heads in the back of that van.
And look, we are in Transylvania. I mean, let's go ahead and play the stereotype. I mean, we've got Dracula roaming around. We've got Frankenstein. The Wolfman's not that far behind. We heard werewolf, their wolf earlier.
That's right.
So, I mean, this is where all the monsters come from. Why wouldn't there be a business that's, Bob's Deadheads?
It seems to work.
That's probably, that's a good franchise. If you can get in on, speaking of unions, if you can get in on the head business for Transylvania, you're probably, that's security right there. You want to know how can you afford the 10,000 and up for a revolving staircase to a hidden passageway? You get
You run the head shop.
The decaying head franchise for Pennsylvania.
It's a whole new meaning with the head shop. Hey man, I'll take a 6 month and a 2 year to go, please. Yeah. All right, Otto von Bluten.
Well, and as many kids that are running around who are the children of the milkman, I wonder how many kids are running around that are children of the headman.
Oh, there we go. Exactly. Wow, you don't look anything like your dad. You look like the milkman. You look like Bob's.
Well, I don't look anything like the milkman. What's the headman look like?
Well, I asked earlier when we first met Igor, we're in Transylvania. Do they have sort of like the Henchman Are Us clothing store? With the sizable hump patches, if you've got the hump on the left versus the right, where do you get the dressing room to try it on and make sure it's going to fit you? It's entirely possible. We are in Transylvania,
right. So who are next door to the big and tall shop? You have the short and slumped.
The short and slumped. And I mean, who are we to judge?
Who are we? We are showing that we are the ugly Americans.
Yes, the ugly Americans trying to put our values on the Romanians.
Well, who are we to judge? I think it's our mandate. I think when you decide to watch a movie 1 minute at a time,
that's true. It puts us on our high horse.
Yeah. Well, that's the only time I've ever been tall in my life. Well, we realize as we finish up this minute 29, as we've been slowly walking along this row of this shelf of compartmentalized heads, each one getting fresher and fresher, we realize just off to frame left, we don't see it yet, but we realize there's yet another shelf to come to, but we're going to have to wait until tomorrow. Oh,
yeah, something's coming.
There is something coming. Let's say 6 months, 2 years, 3 years. I'm assuming we're going to get a pretty freshly dead head.
That's what I would assume, too.
I mean, if we're going to go backwards along the way, I'm assuming we're going to see something even more gruesome than what we've seen already.
Oh, something gruesome is coming.
We'll get today's head.
Don't you worry, but the show's coming.
All right, well, before we wrap up minute 29... Sean, is there anything else on this particular minute that you wanted to either recap, go back to, or bring up that we forgot to mention?
No, I want to see the next head. I want to get on to minute 30.
Well, that seems like you're available for tomorrow then.
Yeah, did you like the way I presumed that I would be around for minute 30?
I did like that. I did like that. But you know what? At this point, we don't have anybody else scheduled, so we're hurting.
I've come this far.
Yeah, exactly. You've come this far.
You might as well stick around for
cap
Friday.
Out the week. We'll each pour some 5-year scotch. That's terrible. I don't even think they make 5-year scotch. That's too. I think the minimum, isn't it like 10 years? The minimum, 12.
Yeah, and
to be called scotch.
And it certainly didn't stick around long after that.
I mean, I'm a scotch drinker, but I don't ever do anything less than a 12. I usually like a 15. That's expensive.
Yeah, I am not a big scotch drinker, as you may have guessed from my inaccurate analogy.
No, there may be. I mean, because you're coming. We're here down in the South where we have Boone's Farm is like a delicacy.
I was going to say, I prefer a good 3-week moonshine.
3-week moonshine. Been sitting in the radiator a good 3 weeks. Make you blind.
Yeah. Yes, it will. Got to make sure you're buying from the right guy.
Blind drunk? Oh yeah, that too. Yeah. Anyway, all right, so Sean, you said you'll come back and play with us tomorrow, but if somebody wants to go right now and figure out what you're doing with your own Movies by Minutes podcast, where can they find you?
Right now, if you cannot wait, I am all over the place. You can find me at on my own podcast, Groundhog Minute, which is at groundhogminute.com. I also wrapped up previous Movie by Minute podcast, and that was we went over This is Spinal Tap, 1 minute at a time, and you can find that at spinaltapminute.com. And then I also have an ongoing weekly show which deals with silent performance and acting and dance and all kinds of performing arts related things, and that's at 5minutesofmime.com.
5 minutes of mime. Well, everybody's got 5 minutes in their day, right? They can carve out 5 minutes.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I can't. I don't make a lot of guarantees. There's not a lot of things in this world you can be sure of. Some things will let you down. Some things will surprise you. But what I can tell you with authority and certainty, each one of those episodes is 5 minutes.
Well, that's easily. You can binge listen to those. You can get a whole bunch in 1 hour.
You can just knock those out 5 minutes at a time.
Well, Sean, I'll tell you, one of my friends, Rodney Hunt, who I know is listening to this, was in a band, a signed band in his younger days. And he and I watched Spinal Tap together when we were in college. And about halfway through, he paused it and he said, I don't know, I can watch the rest of this. This is really making me sad. And I think he realized what a train wreck his life was and where he was headed if he had stayed in that business. So I'm really looking forward to listening to those episodes.
That's the problem. I've now got more podcasts to listen to, and I'm still trying to get my own out here.
It's crazy.
Where am I going to find the time? Where's the time? Well, if people have some extra time on their hands, Walt, and they want to get all caught up on or learn a little bit more about our podcast, where can they go?
Yes. If you like what you hear, please go out to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, make a comment, just so your vote gets counted. And take a minute to go to our website at www.thewilderride.com, and you'll have links galore to find us anywhere on the internet.
Yeah, including our Facebook page. We've got a general Facebook page for anyone to come stumble across, but we've also got a listener group, a closed group to kind of, just whoever wants to come in and play can play. We don't have to worry about bothering the outside world.
Yes, and even as my daughter asked me the other day, you're even on Google Play? Yes, we're even on Google Play.
We're everywhere. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to continue to see all of the row of skulls and see where we what's in that next cubby hole.
Y'all
and
are
we
in
will
for a
go
treat.
all the way through to, hey, maybe there is indoor lighting. We're going to end the week with looking at 2 nasty switches on the wall. With that said, that's it for us today. Come on back tomorrow and check out more of the Wilder Ride, where we are looking at young Frankenstein.
Frankenstone?
Frankenstein.
Deadhead.
Ovaltine.